Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We got a lot going on. Total meltdown, 2020 style at CBS. They woke entire staff losing their minds, so we'll get into that. We got hurricane news, hurricane response news, hurricane political response news. There's 3 different levels of hurricane news, and a variety of other news stories for you today, including, Trump saying weird stuff as usual. But before we get to all that, how are you, Vic?
Hello, Mary Catherine. Doing just fine. As listeners of the show know, I was preparing for a blood test, which I took this morning, and I just showed you the evidence in my arm, and that went fine, and the nurse was very nice. The thing is this. I thought I was doing a pretty good job preparing for it between Monday and today. Mm-hmm. And I came home last night, and my daughter, who had a tough day at school, was hoping that we were going to go out, that I was going to go out with her to dinner because everybody else is in different places. Right. And so it'd just be the 2 of us. And I was just going to heat up leftovers. And she got dressed up. So I said,
oh, my gosh, can't resist that.
Can't resist that. Okay, fine. Let's go. Where do you want to go? She wants to go to the nearby Japanese restaurant. So we go to the Japanese restaurant. What am I going to get? That is the question. Because first of all, I'll eat and I'll be done early enough. But what do I get that it doesn't sort of affect the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. I opted for, they don't have brown rice. So I opted for a bento box.
Okay.
Which is just a variety, but the dinner bento box is big. So I'll give you the good and the bad. Okay, the pros and the cons. Okay, the pros. You start with miso soup. Who doesn't love that? I think it's restorative. Yes, Jennifer's nodding.
Is there a sodium issue there?
Quite possibly.
I don't think sodium is bad for you unless you already have hypertension. But go ahead.
Not going to answer that question.
Love salt. Salt's good for you. The body needs it.
I know. Tofu. I love tofu. I never thought I'd be man enough to admit that, right? In a good, like a miso soup, it's delicious. Or in mapo tofu Chinese, that's great. Okay, so fine. So fine. The bento box arrives. Seaweed salad. Who doesn't love that? It's good.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Edamame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or carby, but fine.
It's good beans.
Yeah.
California roll. Okay, the California roll. So it's white rice all around. I don't even know if there's actual fish in that. It's a crab stick.
Is there anything in that?
No, it's just carbs. Have you ever seen like The Sopranos and Tony and Carmela find this favorite sushi place and like, oh, it's so good, and he's thinking he's so healthy, and he's just getting bigger and bigger just from eating all the rolls. The rolls are going to kill you. Yeah. So I had a California roll. I just a little dab of soy sauce, and then there was a huge piece of salmon. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll eat that salmon. I don't know how they prepared it.
Omega-3s,
cooked
maybe.
It, fried it, but yeah, a lot of omega-3. Okay, so that was good. There was tempura, so it's battered. Tempura vegetable.
Okay.
Hi. Shumai, which is those miniature pot stickers.
The list is really going on.
It is. I told you I did not. I thought the bento box was going to be smaller. And chicken negamaki. I said I don't want to get beef because you're not supposed to have like meat before a blood test. So I went chicken, and it's like in the sauce. It's sitting in there. I basically ate everything. So, but I did skip dessert. I skipped it, and I had a couple pieces of pineapple. And then I got up.
Nailing it.
I think, and this morning, of course, was blood test. So we will know. I know there were some listeners who might have been concerned by my diabetes jokes because, but the truth is, I'm pre-diabetic.
He's safe, guys.
As of this recording, I don't know. And maybe ignorance is bliss, Mary Catherine.
Is this going to be more news that breaks while we're done? Like
hold on. Wait,
I'm
getting a beep. I have now crossed the threshold at 6 point whatever. And I was surprised actually when we tape the show on Thursdays. Sometimes we have donuts in the office, and you usually have one just to taunt me.
Oh yeah.
Because I try to stay away from donuts in the morning, but I see you don't have one. But I'm feeling.
Well, I'm on the wagon. I'm on the.
Oh right, of course, that's carbs. Right. Well, yeah. I'd love to see your blood test. You'd be amazing. Hers would be amazing.
They're basically fine. I have some unconventional views on nutrition because I think that a lot of the conventional views are wrong. And yet my stats are good.
I mean, whatever you're doing is right, obviously.
My stats are good, guys. Yes. Oh,
How
my
are you
goodness.
otherwise?
I'm good. We had a little visit from Steve's parents this week,
that's
so that was
lovely.
fun, hanging out with all the kiddos together. And of course, when the grandparents come and the babies especially, they just grow so fast. So the grandparents are always blown away when they come
Every
for
time.
a couple months, right?
Yeah, a couple
Because
months.
we got a lot more words, we got a lot more conversation,
That's nice.
a lot more climbing furniture, all those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So that's exciting.
Does it make your life easier when they visit? Like, does it free you up to like, let's go out, let's go?
Oh
do
yeah,
this,
no,
do
they're
that?
fantastic. They're like
Stay at
very low maintenance and very willing to help, which is on both sides. The grandparents are
That's
like that. So
wonderful.
it's a great combo for us. In fact, we were just saying, like, we need to get my parents back up here soon. It's been a while.
Yeah, alternate.
Bring them in so we can do date nights and such, on which we'll probably invite Vic and Kate. Let's see if we can get a group together.
That would be lovely.
So that's good. I was going to say, when you were talking about your phlebotomy adventure, which sounds dirtier than it is.
Yes.
It reminded me that every time I go for such a test, they'll be like, my veins aren't the best. You know, some people get a compliment like, you got great veins.
Yes.
I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Steve is. I'm not.
Yeah. Kate.
Okay.
Kate is great.
I've accepted this about myself.
Mhm.
But I get a lot of, did you hydrate before this?
Oh.
And I'm always like, how dare. I am always hydrated. Okay. There's a whole
Yeah. No, I see
every
it. She has
day,
the water.
every moment.
Yeah.
I am hydrated.
Well,
Okay.
where sometimes they're drawing it and it's thick. Is that it? They got a little tap it. They're
No,
gonna
it's just
tap that.
see, now you're gonna gross people out.
Oh, right.
Um,
Sorry.
no, they just are like, where are your veins? Look, you can
Yes.
look. There's like nothing
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Maybe it is the sodium. Anyway,
Does your left arm also feel numb like mine?
I've shrunken everything
Yeah,
down
everything is what's happening
to
here.
nothing. It can
Right.
never
Why
be
is everything
rehydrated.
getting dark? Everything's
Oh
getting
my
dark.
gosh, that's what
Okay.
happened. All right. Shall we get in?
Speaking of,
Yeah.
okay.
Shall we get into the meltdown
Let's
at
do it.
CBS? All right. Okay. Well, there's two parts of this story, both involving journalism ethics.
Yeah.
The first, let's do the 60 Minutes story.
Right.
Okay. So 60 Minutes released two different things
Right.
Of its interview with Kamala Harris, particularly on her answer to a question about the Israel,
Right.
the war in the Middle East. Okay. The preview that they released on social media of Bill Whitaker asking the question and her answering the question was her giving the word salad version that we played on the show. Actually, we can just play that version right now.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Then the interview aired on 60 Minutes, which I actually don't know these days if that gets more eyeballs than a social media
streaming,
clip
anything online,
because things are different these days. But that's the more prestigious version, right? On the TV. That's the one they think is going to get more eyeballs.
Sure. Or turning in to Channel 9 or 210, wherever you are in the country at, 7 o'clock.
So
get in there.
On the broadcast, they play a different version of an answer to this question, and we'll play that one.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
So to me, it sounds like the first one is word salad. The second one is cleaned up. A more direct answer.
Yeah.
I would love to know, like, the actual order of operations here. I would love to know where these answers were in the interview and if they moved things around. Because, yes, you can edit interviews for time. We all understand this. Although the media does not understand this when they get, like, a James O'Keefe tape.
Oh.
They're like, this is edited. Well, it's like, yeah, everything you guys do is edited.
As if they don't.
Okay?
Right.
So, like, yes, you can edit for time. But if you are mix and matching answers from different questions to this question, that is not ethical. if in this case you have cleaned it up for her, which is kind of what it seems like they did here, there's a possibility that he asked the question and that both of those things were in the long version of the answer.
Yeah.
I suppose that could be, it's on the edge. But you know what would help? A transcript or the full interview.
A transcript. Wow. You know, you can order those. They usually say that at the end of the show or something. Like for a transcript, you can
apparently there's not one for this show.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
I was reminded of when we handle, not that we do this a lot anymore, but certainly in the Weekly Standard days we did this, and I had a stint running this particular section of Letters to the Editor, where you would always explain that letters will be edited for clarity and length.
Right.
And I think these editors probably had that in mind, and in the same process simultaneously doing her a solid.
Right.
And having her sound more succinct, as if that's how her thought process goes. I think it's instructive. Somebody had floated several months ago Reagan's last interview with 3 or 4 of the main anchors while he was in the Oval Office. And it was Dan Rather at CBS, Peter Jennings at ABC, Tom Brokaw at NBC, and Bernie Shaw at CNN.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, they played the whole thing from beginning to end, including the opening before they actually roll. So a camera had been rolling, and they're just sitting around. And the light banter with Reagan and these men about light stuff is fascinating.
Fantastic.
It's also the idea that, Reagan was, at that point, non compos mentis.
Right.
He still is good in this interview, which is in 87, 88. I assume it's in 88.
Right.
It's telling. And it would be great to see a completely unedited, director's cut, not just director's cut, the uncut version, basically, of the Kamala Harris interview.
Because you don't have the excuse anymore that you can't put out the full video because the airwaves only allow so much time.
The YouTube
or the newsprint only allows so much time.
The internet will allow it.
The whole internet's before you.
Yeah.
And you can release as you see fit. It's pretty standard practice to release transcripts of any vice president or president full interview.
Yeah.
And it's useful for transparency. It would be useful to Bill Whitaker, who did a great job.
I thought he did a very good job.
For us to see the great job he did that may or may not have been distorted when it went on air.
Right.
This is like sort of a long-standing policy. But
the thing is, watching Kamala since she started running, and her answers, what would drive me nuts is, as a listener and as a viewer, and maybe as a journalist also, you want to ask the how and the why, right? Okay, she's telling us this. How? And what I appreciated with Bill Whitaker on 60 Minutes is he literally says, how? How are you going to pay for this? How is this different from that? And then, of course, the other question is the why, in terms of why did you change your position on these things? 2 observations of Kamala in the unedited version, or even in the version that you see on CBS. One is she doesn't speak necessarily an octave lower, but several, keys lower. She has a lower voice. There's obviously not the insane cackle, right? So, I mean, she's been training for this. She sounds very, very sober. The second thing is, in addition to the voice, somebody must have told her, an advisor, that no matter what the question is, stick to the talking points. Whatever they say, you don't actually have to answer the question. Just say it, because chances are the places that we're going, aside from 60 Minutes, if you think about Colbert, or if she ends up eventually with Jimmy Kimmel, and of course Howard Stern, and The View, they're not going to press her. So just say what you want. Let me just, and all you have to do is throw in a premise like, first, let me say this, and you're done. And they'll just nod along. Right. And that seems to be working for her. I don't know with the American public, but certainly with the interviewers.
Let's play her sort of devastating moment on The View.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
That was Sunny Hostin asking that question.
Yeah.
Who wants to help her.
Yeah. She's throwing her.
Sunny Hostin wants to help her.
It's not even a softball, it's a T-ball.
Sunny Hostin's staff and the research staff at The View have read that Kamala Harris wants to distance herself from Joe Biden and in the reporting, and they're giving her a chance to do that. Sunny Hostin actually gave her 2 chances to do that. This one is the worst answer. It's already an ad.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Like, there's a gracious way to answer that question where you say, well, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback our administration too much. We came in a tough time. There are, of course, disagreements that the president and I had behind the scenes, but I'm not going to air those. That's part of the gig.
Yeah.
But let's look forward to what I want to do or something like that. Or just pick one thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think the withdrawal from Afghanistan was the correct decision, but was not executed well, right? And I know she's not brave enough to say that, but but I think what I find shocking, I truly don't know if anyone is prepping her anymore, because how could you not anticipate that question? We've said this from the first interview, because the first interview had, what would you do on day one?
Right.
And she has no answer.
Right.
What is happening over there?
It's funny. It's the why do you want to be president to Ted Kennedy?
Yes.
That I think it was Roger Mudd who asked him that back in '80. That killed the campaign. But it's funny because this didn't necessarily kill her campaign. Although who knows if she loses, the pieces on what went wrong are going to be amazing. I think because people will want to finally talk about the situation and how it got this point. And that's a big if. The second thing is that question of how would you differentiate yourself from Joe Biden? What would you do different?
Yeah.
At the very least, I would have said if I were her, Joe Biden laid the groundwork. He promised to be a bridge to this future generation. We are that generation. So he got things rolling. And from what he got rolling, here's how I want to take it even further.
Look at that, Vic.
You like
Have
that?
you ever run for office before?
Or
you just
let me think about it. Last time I ran for office, I believe,
pay
was
us $1 million.
President of National Honor Society. Was the last time I ran for.
I think we have
No. College Republicans. What
at
am
the
I
head
talking
of
about?
each ticket is basically an uncoachable person.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. No. I mean,
You
they're
can't-
unleashed. They're unleashed.
You can't coach
You
these
cannot
people. And
rein them in.
Trump is sort of like a super insane wide receiver who has some talent, right? He's Ocho Cinco.
Ocho Cinco. Yeah.
You can't you can't contain him.
You don't know what he's
gonna
gonna
have
do.
a bunch of liabilities, but he's gonna have moments of brilliance, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna get some yards out of him.
Colorful comments.
Yes. And then Kamala's like, I don't know. I was like, is it?
Yeah.
She's like a team manager who you can't get to pack the right things. Like, I don't mean that in a gendered sense that he's the wide receiver and she's helping on the sidelines. I just mean she doesn't seem capable of much.
Right.
And I wonder if that team is thrown together, slapdash.
This is what's interesting.
Since July, right? She doesn't have her own people.
No.
Okay? She doesn't have her own people. Why not? Because she's run through staff like crazy.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of Kamala per
Right.
se loyalists. Right. There are a bunch of Biden people, and then there are a bunch of Obama people.
Right.
My question is she so uncoachable that they've kind of had it with her?
Right. Okay. So here's the thing.
Is that a controversial theory? I don't know.
No. Okay. So they
doesn't look like anything's getting prepped.
They decided to do a media blitz. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you
why the
shift
big change?
gears? Why would you, pick your metaphor. You would only change if you think something wasn't working. Now, on the outside to us, when we look at these polls, I mean, there was a new Reuters poll out today. She's up by 6 points among suburban voters. We don't know. We don't know suburban where. Suburban California, obviously, or wherever, New Jersey, who knows where. But as opposed to Pennsylvania. So that I think is a little bit harder to gauge. But you would think that she's doing great. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just keep on doing your thing. Don't talk to the press. Certainly not have a press conference. She is not going to have a press conference unless things get that desperate.
Right.
So clearly there's something wrong on the internals. We're not seeing those internals. The only internals we see now are from certain Senate Democratic races, and they get leaked to the press. The first one is in Wisconsin, right? Tammy Baldwin. Supposedly that is now neck and neck with Eric Hovde. And then the other one is Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan. And supposedly in that particular race, the quote that was used that came out of that was that Kamala is, quote, underwater. I don't know how accurate that is, or if we're just...
In what sense?
In what sense?
Likability,
Right.
or what, what is it?
Right. And she's running against Mike Rogers. And so the Slotkin people are worried in Michigan as well from those internals. So if candidate internals are bad, that's at least some indicator of how Harris might be doing at the top of
Well,
the
and then
ticket.
there are also public polls, I should note, that show Tim Sheehy kind of running away with
Oh,
it
yeah. That's
in Montana. And
they're
John
not gonna-
Tester, a longtime serving
Incumbent.
Democrat, has been very hard to knock off in Montana. And Sheehy, I believe he was a former Navy SEAL. He's a businessman. Looks like he might be capable of doing it. He's up about 7 to 9 points in some of these polls.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, they're shifting away.
That whole universe of
funds.
poll info is interesting, and maybe what they're seeing to say, I need to do something.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is, you were just saying about the campaign that was put together. There's not a Harris. There's not necessarily a Harris team that's been with her since since the California days when she was a prosecutor or the attorney general. By and large, I'm sure there are some people there for that, but she inherited the Biden people. So you think about Jen O'Malley Dillon, right? And then you think about but they wanted the Obama people like David Plouffe and Stephanie Cutter.
Right.
How are they all getting along?
How are they all getting
I would love to
along?
know. And again, if things don't work out, if she wins, you'll never hear. It's all water under the bridge. They'll all scramble for positions in the next administration. But if things don't work out, it'll be like the big piece I think that was in the Atlantic after Hillary Clinton lost, and that's very telling about just the lack of communication and all the animosity.
You know what is a thing that I would enjoy?
Yeah.
If Sunny Hostin's clip ends up being memorialized
Oh
for
my
all
gosh.
time, if she loses, which she may very well not, if it ends up being memorialized, I do think that that's a lovely deterrent for the type of interview that people give
Beware
on The View.
Beware of the softball interview, because you might ostensibly you think it's going to help you, but it makes you look foolish.
Well, and Hostin herself, who is a fairly vicious partisan, I would say is the term.
Yeah, that's a good term.
For her to have been the one that lands this blow is
to scuttle her campaign.
It's poetic, shall we say.
Do you remember how she tried to go after Nikki Haley for her name?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and all sorts of racial stuff. It's always, who was she after the other day? She was after Brittany Mahomes.
Wow.
For liking a Trump social media post because Brittany Mahomes has interracial children and she's betraying them by liking a tweet or something. She's off the charts. But anyway, that would be poetic.
That would be great.
That would be poetic. No, I think they're kind of... there's one more thing. We've got a little off track, and we're going to go back to the CBS Meltdown.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I'm just going to give people a preview of that. But I think it's worth talking about Tim Walz. I said this the other day on Special Report, that if you look at the behavior of the two campaigns, Harris' campaign looks like it's floundering. You've got her starting fights with Governor DeSantis while a hurricane is coming at him.
Yeah.
A fight she cannot win.
No.
You've got her running mate calling for the abolishment of the Electoral College, Tim Walz, at a fundraiser, which sounds like making up excuses before you've lost. They dropped this insane policy idea about Medicare and long-term care on The View. Not that anyone cares about policy, but it was kind of a wild, let's pick something out of the clear blue sky. And they've radically changed their strategy. That looks like a team that's not happy with where they are.
Radically changing your strategy with 28, now 27-something days left.
God, so short.
That's generally not a good idea. It's sort of like, I remember in the 1992 campaign, and the Bush campaign was floundering so badly. Towards the end, they finally brought in, the great James Baker, to come in and fix things. It was too late to fix. Right. I mean, everything was. It was.
I should also note on the other side of that, a smart Twitter follow, I think it was his name is Marcus USA, noted that, hey, a lot of people in 2012 thought that Barack Obama looked like he was floundering in the last 3 weeks of the campaign. He turned a little more bitter in his
Yeah.
rhetoric. There were some signs that, and he said just a warning that like what looks like desperation to us doesn't always mean desperation in the other
Good
side.
point.
So that's a good point. Although I think there's more data for the fact that Trump underpolls, right? So if they're seeing where they are and it's basically tied, that's not great for them.
Right.
On the other side of the coin, I will note that if you look at Donald Trump's planned rallies, you might have a similar thought about what the heck they are doing, because he's doing a rally in Colorado. He's doing a rally in Madison Square Garden. He's doing a rally in Coachella in California.
Not the festival. Just happens to be in the
just
valley.
at Coachella.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Why? We don't know. This is certainly an interesting choice of where to put your resources. I would say possibly they're justifying it in California, New York, by saying if we bring energy to these places, we grab a few more House races.
Oh.
I think that there's some data he can use for that, because when he went to Montana and gave a rally, he kind of did get a bump from it. Okay, I'm willing to listen.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to listen. I also think Trump's vanity might just be like, let's just go and have rallies.
Right.
And also maybe they want to pump up his popular vote numbers in these blue states.
I mean,
and
quite possibly, but time is precious.
time is precious, resources are
I'd like to
precious.
see the latest numbers out of Colorado, but Colorado's
these got to be down like
it hasn't been
double digits
a
at
competitive
least.
state for Republicans. I don't think in some time.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe
New
this-
Mexico used
maybe
to be
this
winnable,
is-
and that's
you know what I thought of?
What?
Maybe this is for Boebert,
Oh,
because she's about tied.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, they could lose. Republicans could lose the House. We don't know. We're not. Everyone's paying so much attention to, obviously the race for president and the Senate. But you know, it's razor thin margin that Mike Johnson has.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
House. So,
Yeah. So, and there are California and New York House races that are on the edge.
Oh, there are very close ones in California too. Yeah.
So, at any rate, but one could certainly make the argument, along with some of his loopier statements, that he's also looking like, what the heck are you guys doing? The problem is that the average level of loopiness for Trump versus a Democratic campaign is much higher, right? So a diversion from it. Can we even identify it? I don't know.
Do you remember free IVF? That was the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We went down that.
Rich
Oh,
Trump.
my God. Okay. Look, I like that we went through all that. We got some stuff done.
We
there.
did some. Yeah.
I liked that.
Yeah, we did.
We're gonna go back to the CBS Meltdown. That was very organic, though. We were really getting into the horse race.
We did.
Let's go back to the CBS Meltdown.
Okay.
This is not the 60 Minutes thing.
Ah, yes.
This is
other
the Tony
Meltdown.
DeCopel, Ta-Nehisi Coates argument.
Interesting. Yes.
Ta-Nehisi Coates and Tony DeCopel, who I don't know if I'm pronouncing his
That's
correctly.
how I would say it.
Although I don't think that he would object. So
Yeah, he wouldn't.
anyway, these are the players, guys. And Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a book called The Message,
Yes.
which is a collection of 4 essays to much acclaim.
Oh,
So much
bestseller on Amazon.
acclaim. He is a public intellectual of a sort, certainly of the left, fairly woke, writes for The Atlantic, is, I think, recognized as quite a good writer.
Ugh.
I don't know
They
about
think he's a good writer, but
Yeah.
he's a terrible writer. Yes. If you're into mixed metaphors and other garbled metaphors and things
Yeah.
like that, great.
Well, as my friend Carol said on the podcast normally, which I also host, she called him so mid.
yeah, at best. At best.
So anyway, he's getting this huge, very elite rollout for this book. The main essay in the book, I think the longest one, is about Israel-Palestine.
Yes.
And in this essay, he doesn't mention, Hamas or surrounding
No, does not mention October 7th.
areas or anyone aligned against Israel and its right to exist. Here's a minute-long clip of Tony DeCopel on CBS Mornings, an anchor there, interviewing Coates about this book. See what you think of the tone.
Has worked for a long time, very talented, smart guy. Leave out so much. Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel, in any condition, has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. That's the first thing I would say. I am most concerned always with those who don't have a voice, with those who don't have the ability to talk. I have asked repeatedly in my interviews whether there is a single network, mainstream organization in America with a Palestinian American bureau chief or correspondent who actually has a voice to articulate their part of the world.
That's the great controversy, Vic.
Okay. So yes, as Tony DeCouple mentions, he does not mention Hamas or the terror that they unleashed on October 7 and what is happening. I should say this first, which is in addition to Tal Fortgang and Naomi Riley and Robert Little in this coming up Weekend Beacon, we have a big feature beginning with Barton Swaim, the great Barton Swaim, on Ta-Nehisi's book, The Message. He seems to be obsessed in finding comparisons of segregation and apartheid in Israel and what he calls Palestine with his visits to South Carolina and Columbia, which is, he says, still so deep in Confederate lore and love. And so he's constantly looking. That's his focus, is on comparisons of segregation.
Right.
And he talks about different experiences he has when he was in the Middle East. It was part of this Palestinian Writers Festival. And as they were going through the Lions Gate, apparently, they got stopped for 45 minutes by Israeli soldiers for no other reason than that he says that they were Muslims. Never mind the fact that, 20% of Israel has an Arab population.
Right.
And there aren't exactly that many Jewish citizens living in a lot of the Arab countries around. And as
or that if you erase any acts of aggression from Palestinians on Jews, you erase the reason to have the checkpoint.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as Barton mentions as well, he doesn't mention that maybe the reason for the checkpoint and they kept them there is because the tendency of Palestinian terrorists to just lunge at Israeli citizens with knives and blow up, public squares. Maybe that's a factor in all of this. And he makes a comparison, he says, standing out there in the sun to, he says, with their sunglasses, like Georgia sheriffs with their sunglasses. Georgia, Mary Catherine, he did Columbia, and yet he throws Georgia in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, this all seems sort of pat and a bit intellectually lazy. He also admits in the book that he had one conception of Israel shaped by the Western world for many years. Then he took one 10-day trip and it changed everything. And now he's descending from on high to give us the new version of how we should understand this.
Right.
And he specifically says that he rejects complexity, that he is rejecting speaking to people who would
both sides.
Right. He says it's just black and white, and I'm not going to engage with the other ideas. Okay, whatever. Point is, he goes on for this interview, and this interview, which does include one sentence, which is like a little jerky on DeCouple's part.
Okay.
That's the term I'm going to use.
All right. Yeah.
He says, might have been clumsily made as a point.
All right.
He says this essay wouldn't be out of place in an extremist's backpack. Okay?
Sorry to be tough.
So
wow.
You could take offense to that.
Yeah.
Just take offense to it on set.
Yeah.
And I think Coates's thesis actually is quite radical.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes me crazy about this is the uproar over this, which Coates is assisting by saying, well, yes, he doesn't think that Tony DeCouple did Gale on set a service.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a man who is getting the most kind treatment for his book rollout possible.
Yeah.
Accepting this live interview where he was asked some tough questions, and he is allegedly a public intellectual. Why do you not, with relish, defend your thesis?
Want to engage because they're not used to having to do that.
So they're so not used to having to do that now CBS is in full meltdown. So all the a la the New York Times in 2020 over Tom Cotton's op-ed.
Yeah, this is their experience. This is their struggle session.
They are losing it. DeKoppel has been called into several struggle sessions. There has been yelling. There have been leaks of audio. There's been yelling and crying.
Yeah, including from Tony DeKoppel, they said.
Well, he's getting bullied. He's getting bullied by everyone in his organization.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if the tears were from him being attacked or was his tears of, the mea culpa. I must now go down on my hands and knees and beg forgiveness. I hope it's not that.
He does seem to have expressed some regret that people are upset, which you should not do, right?
No.
Your job is to ask questions. He's asking questions. One line that struck me, this is a left-leaning reporter. How do I say his last name? Justin Barragona?
Sure.
You know him from Twitter, probably. Anyway, he's reporting on it. The Free Press is reporting on it from sort of like a free speech perspective. This guy's reporting on it from a protect the middle management snowflakes perspective. And one of the quotes, the pull quote, I'll just read two pull quotes from it, from his reporting from behind the scenes at this news organization. One CBS insider told him, quote, "If Tony would just shut the F up, none of this would be happening." Okay, that's one. But this one's even better. Here's his other pull quote from a CBS insider. "People don't even know how to move forward."
Okay.
My contempt for someone who does not even know how to move forward in the wake of an interview is off the charts.
Right.
I would like to have an HR moment about my personal offense at your emotional fragility.
Yes.
I would like to have a national conversation about you wusses. I would like to do that.
So he met with, DeKoppel had to meet with CBS has a race and culture unit, which sounds like something out of the Cultural Revolution, really.
Yeah, they have a thought police unit.
A thought police,
inside
it's within CBS's Ministry of the Interior. It's a branch of CBS's NKVD, and their purpose, if you go to their website, to their homepage for the CBS Race and Culture Unit, is to basically monitor what they call intonation and context.
And body language.
Intonation. How did you intone that?
Again, I just want to say this is from an interview.
We are, yes.
An interview on a morning show.
Interview. Oh, he had a hard interview. Let's never do that again. Can I quote at length our friend Tim Carney, who had this observation on X, right? And this is what Tim says. He says, quote, "It's important to remember the tiny non-representative bubble so many of our journalists live in. It's not merely that they are overwhelmingly left. It's that they are so sheltered from regular views that they are psychologically harmed. The masking until 2023, mid-2022, there were at least 5 articles about how it was impossible for parents to get on with their lives until there was a COVID vax for toddlers. This irrational fear of the world was heavily concentrated among journalists." And that is definitely worth taking into account, because what is happening here?
It's so embarrassing, but they're not capable of being embarrassed. And here's why.
Yeah.
They're not capable of being embarrassed because the grown-ups in charge will not act like grown-ups.
No.
People should be told to walk if they have this big an issue with it. If CBS had an issue with one sentence that DeKoppel said, they should have said they had an issue with that, told him they had an issue with that, and he could say, "Oh yeah, I goofed." We move on. Right? But they can't do that because the inmates are in charge of the asylum.
That's right.
And until they get a hold of that, or until they decide that this is not how to run a news agency, they're not going to escape from this loop.
No.
By the way, other meltdowns of this kind, NBC's hiring of Ronna McDaniel. You remember that?
Yeah, that was short-lived.
Yep. CNN's Trump town hall.
Oh, my God.
Caused a meltdown.
Yeah, people got fired.
As I said, the New York Times' running of the Tom Cotton op-ed during 2020. You'll notice that these all go one direction. Interesting. Yeah. So interesting.
I would say, by the way, though, just kudos to some of Tony DeKoppel's colleagues like Jan Crawford, who stood up for Tony and saying that didn't think there was anything wrong with this.
By the way, it should not take courage to do such
No,
a thing, but
it
she's on a
shouldn't.
call with all of
Yeah.
her woke colleagues and the higher ups, and you do put yourself at risk standing up for someone like
Right.
this.
And also, you mentioned earlier Gayle King, as if Gayle King has never had given tough interviews before. We pointed out in the Free Beacon about her interview with then Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, looking at a photo of the Republican House leadership and her saying to him, and again, it's Gayle King. It's supposed to be light and
Oh, it's supposed to be-
breezy.
it's supposed to be so
She hangs out.
cushy.
She hangs out with Obama on the yacht. And is good friends with, of course, Oprah. And she says to Paul Ryan, this I look at this photo, I don't see people like me in it, and just and in addition to that, interviewing a rescued, I believe it was a rescued hostage.
No, let me play a little clip of that.
Let's
This
hear
is
that.
Emily Hand's father. Emily Hand
Or the
was
father, yes, the father.
Emily Hand was one of the youngest people taken from into Gaza as a captive, and this is Gayle King on a cushy morning show interviewing her father.
But now this seems to be all about politics. What do you say about that? You have innocent children in Palestinians who are dying, innocent Israeli children who are dying, and no one seems to be able to say enough, stop that.
I'm not interested in politics at all. My only concern is getting Emily back.
So that's a parent whose
Yeah.
child was abducted by terrorists, and she's like, but don't you need to acknowledge the larger Palestinian suffering, sir?
Yeah.
Like this is what she's allowed to do because it goes the correct direction. By the way, the father of a hostage should be treated differently than a public intellectual.
Yeah.
And what they're demanding is the public intellectual be treated more kindly than the father of a hostage.
Again, obviously, not all journalists are treated the same depending on who they're interviewing. And the other thing is, if the father did, obviously said the right thing here, but if he wanted to, he could just say, yeah, they weren't dying on October 6th.
Yeah.
None of this would have happened.
It's just again, my contempt
Yeah.
rises unabated for people who cannot handle this. And on that note, I was going to do a little bit of COVID coverage today.
Yeah, please.
Because, that's a thing that happened. I just want to note that I appreciate Dr. Jay Bhattacharya gathering many of the people, actual public intellectuals, who were on the other side of some of the pandemic regulations. He invited them to Stanford, and Stanford hosted a pandemic policy review with a bunch of skeptics, led by Bhattacharya. Vinay Prasad was there.
Wow.
Scott Atlas was there.
Oh, yeah.
And the way it is covered by media, I can read a little bit from, this is from the sfist.com, and it's echoed in major papers around the area. What's happening at Stanford, writes one medical school dean on social media regarding the pandemic policy symposium at Stanford University today, featuring a number of Fauci-hating anti-maskers who took controversial stances on public health policies during the pandemic. The Friday conference is called Pandemic Policy, Planning the Future, Assessing the Past. Assessing the past seems like a good idea.
No. Move forward.
yeah.
We were just talking about moving forward. You got to move forward.
And beginning with the very first panel discussion moderated by conservative Christian podcast host Wilk Wilkinson, the event seems to have a peculiarly right-wing bias. The first panel this morning was about evidence-based decision-making. That also seems like a good idea, and the restrictive policies that many cities put in place in 2020 and sought to answer the question, how well did these policies work to protect the public from COVID-19, and what were their unintended consequences?
Why do you have to learn from the past? That's what I want to know.
Like, the idea that this is being treated as crazy.
Yeah. Just the framing of it. The framing says it all.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020, this piece grants. Certainly when it comes to a novel pathogen and watching the horror show that unfolded in New York City in March and April of 2020, other cities took some strict measures, blah, blah, blah. USCF's Dr. Monica Gandhi was on the panel, and she was likely a voice of reason. But she was outnumbered by folks like Marty Makary, who also had bad ideas and wrong think. I mean, this is the tone of the entire thing. Jay Hotez, who is famously wrong about basically everything in the pandemic, says...
Dr. Hotez.
Yes.
Who always did his interviews, by the way.
Peter Hotez.
Peter Hotez. He would always do the interview with the lab coat on, right? He's a bow tie and the lab coat. Maybe he's done some not wearing that, but the times I've seen him is wearing this outfit. And also who once I watched on MSNBC accuse Republicans of basically committing homicide.
Sure.
Okay.
My goodness, what's happening at Stanford, writes Dr. Peter Hotez. This is awful, a full-on anti-science agenda. Okay, The Nation covered it similarly. The local press covered it similarly. What they're objecting to is not these people's conclusions. They're not contesting their conclusions. They're not testing the arguments that were at this event at all. What they're saying is having the event is dangerous.
Yes.
The event itself is a problem. Discussion is the problem.
Was it dangerous because they weren't masked and they weren't 6 feet apart from each other? Is that why it's
They've
dangerous?
moved on from that. The ideas are dangerous.
Oh,
you see.
yes.
It gives it gives like a toehold to contrarians in academia, and you wouldn't want that. Like mental midgets, these people.
No, the two scariest words for them would be evidence-based.
Yes. Greg Gonsalves, who is also famously wrong about many things, argues that the two symposia, one held at Johns Hopkins, thank you guys, are focused on establishing a beachhead in liberal academia for these figures who are largely disrespected among their academic peers. I'm so glad that these people have survived what I'm so glad that these people have survived what Greg Lukianoff calls the conformity gauntlet.
Yeah.
Which is, in order to advance in press or in academia, you have to all believe the same things. Both of these kinds of stories illustrate that. And if you don't, they just get to paint you and say you're disrespected. Well, these people have risen above that because they're very smart. They've succeeded in their positions. Some of them have tenure. It's working for them. A rare occasion where it's working for a conservative or a contrarian view. And the idea that we shouldn't examine these things is disturbing to me. But it's what most of media and academia thinks.
Well, I mean, it just depends on what side they're on. So, I mean, if it's going to make them look bad, they do not want to go back. Can't we just move forward? Let's just forget. Look, we didn't know what was happening for a long time, so that's why we did these things.
Hindsight's 20/20.
We did. We were talking about it on this show a long time ago.
Hindsight's 20/20. I did want to mention also Vinay Prasad and others got together to do a review of the most famous school masking study and found that, of course, there were 1,000 confounding reasons that it fell short and it should not be used to make the conclusions, the causal conclusions it did about, well, one district dropped mandates and another didn't, and here's what happened, and that those cannot be considered causal, and that it's kind of ridiculous that we were doing science this way. And by the way, there still is no randomized controlled trial.
No, and we're still deep in the woods on this, like the recovery for the children in terms of the learning loss. It is taking years. It is taking years. As we know, for example, the sort of tangential to this is the that story. I think we were discussing it maybe here on this episode, previous episode, about students in college who were telling professors, their difficulty in reading a book.
Yeah.
Because they were not taught in high school to read books from beginning to end. They're just doing excerpts. And certainly when you throw into that the whole remote learning thing, it didn't help.
It's not great.
No, it's not great.
It's not great, man. So I'm glad for the contrarians, and I hope that wherever Tony DeCopel, which, by the way, thank you to this controversy for bringing him to my attention. He's quite a handsome man. I'd never come across Tony before. But so congratulations to these guys, Jim Bhattacharya, for being able to make it to the top of their industries, because it's really hard if you have any wrong think. And I hope they stay there, and I hope that some people learn to have conversations and not wet the bed. But we're not there yet. Now to a literal storm.
Oh, yes.
Milton hit Florida this week. The governor of Florida and all the organizations in Florida that are extremely good at disaster prep had been anticipating this for quite some time. One of my favorite stories, I do think I have so much respect for people who can do disaster prep, because it's very hard work. It requires so much thought. And if competent governance can be an art form, truly these press conferences from from DeSantis
Yeah.
are performance art
Right.
of his competence. He has so many things at his command, and that the point of that is that it ends up serving people
Yeah.
who get correct messaging, who know what's happening, who know where to go for help, and then the help gets there when they need it. So one of the ways he did this, which I just think is such a fascinating bit of disaster prep that people don't think about, after Helene, there's debris everywhere. So these two back-to-back hurricanes. Debris is everywhere. You got to move the debris or else it becomes missiles during the next
Yes.
storm. Well, what happens when you have to move a bunch of debris at one time? Well, you need the trucks to do it.
Right.
And you need the landfills to be open to deposit the debris.
Stuff.
Sometimes they're closed at various normal hours because in a normal situation, you don't need them.
Right.
So what DeSantis does is he uses his power to say, hey, we're going to keep these open for 24 hours a day in Pinellas County. They need to be accessible so that these trucks can go in all day long and put stuff away.
Round the clock.
Well, someone didn't cut the bolt or someone didn't show up to open. And DeSantis used his state powers to say, well, we're going to open these landfills. If you guys aren't going to be here to open them, we will man them and we will open them, thus getting the debris into the landfill and off of people's streets so that it didn't then become a danger to them.
Missiles.
This is a thing that requires so much thought about what your powers are,
Right.
what the ground looks like, what the future looks like. It amazes me.
What I sort of interrupt you, but what I don't understand, Mary Catherine, is why did he not take the vice president's call?
We're going to get to that. So we don't know much about Milton yet, although it does seem to have been slightly less horrific than we thought it might be.
It is now a 3, which is better than a 5, obviously, and a 4. But
I was watching a press conference of his, and I talk about it. I like DeSantis. I always have. But I also like it because people are starved for this kind of governance.
Yeah.
And if the world were fair, these kinds of press conferences would get the press that Cuomo's nonsense ones did during COVID.
Oh.
Right? I watched a press conference, like 10 minutes of it, and he goes through where the shelters are, how many people the shelters can hold, where the pet-friendly shelters are,
Right.
VA nursing homes, and telling families that they can stay with their veteran elderly relatives and that will be safe for them. Corporate partnerships with Starlink and Uber and Lyft that allow people to get free rides. On and on and on. The number of linemen coming in, where they're coming from. He knows all these things. And he's telling people very clearly, constantly, what to do. This is like a masterclass in storm messaging.
And yet no Emmy award for him, is what you're saying?
I do not believe there will be an Emmy award for him.
Really, you know how people, will tease Governor DeSantis for not having the greatest social skills or being to interact with people certain ways and whatever. He has it where it counts.
He has a superpower, and this is it.
Playing. Yeah. Yes, he has a superpower. It is playing to those strengths. And it's like, do you want somebody who's going to smooth talk you and make you feel better by his voice, his dulcet tones, or hers, or somebody who's going to get the job done?
Well, I think we've gotten,
which is what he does.
We've gotten used to government reacting to things instead of knowing that they're coming. A hurricane is a perfect example where things are going to be horribly wrong at some point in the process because it's a disaster. But if you are best set up for it and you have what Jim Cantore called a well-oiled machine in Florida, you can mitigate the issue. And I do think maybe Florida is sort of a corrective to the post-Katrina thoughts about how we deal with disasters nationally, which is the state should be on the front lines. State and local folks working together should know where most of the resources are. And then the feds, who are less competent and slower but have money, can come in later.
I remember during Hurricane Katrina, then Mayor Ray Nagin of New Orleans was on the phone.
For no responsibility.
Yeah, no. And he was on the phone, and he was basically screaming for help. And I'm like, I get it. It's a terrible storm, but you're the mayor.
Right.
You have to put on at least the appearance of leadership here, and you're having a meltdown. You've got, it's like as a parent, you got to be strong for the kids.
I know.
You got to be strong for the kids.
Leadership is truly in short supply.
Yeah.
And it actually does help save lives, and it counteracts the thing that, by the way, Anderson Cooper is down in Florida.
Oh, right.
I don't think he ever made it to North Carolina, but he is.
A lot more media attention.
Yeah. By by the way, another thing that leadership does is that it counteracts the thing that the media cares about almost exclusively on hurricanes at this point, which is disinformation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you have a person who's in charge, who looks like he knows what he's doing, who has the facts and gives them clearly, there is not a vacuum for a bunch of rumors. There's not a vacuum for a bunch of bad actors. There's not a vacuum where people are going to say, I don't know, listen to Trump about what is happening with the storm response, because it's very clear that DeSantis has what's going on.
Right.
So
I did notice on CNN, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, that Vice President Harris, they had her calling in.
yeah, so this is ongoing. And again,
She's on it because, in the past, as she's always been calling governors about
totally.
hurricane.
And again, my point in talking about DeSantis and a little bit about this fight, this political fight, is that we should incentivize the people, the good behavior of the people who know how to actually save lives, right? And when we have a chance to do that, let's highlight it and then point out that people who swoop in and do nothing and try to make a spectacle of it should not be the people that we reward. So here's Kamala Harris, who bruised off of her first engagement with DeSantis, in which she called him irresponsible and selfish, and he said she has no role here. I am trying to help the people of Florida. Like, I got no time for this. She then, I'm sure behind the scenes after Biden backed DeSantis by saying he has my personal cell phone number, she insists that she be involved in this response.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Biden seems like he's more on it than he was. But so here's Harris joining a briefing on Zoom. Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is there. The administrator of FEMA is there. Various other government agencies, Coast Guard, just saying what they're up to. Okay. Kamala is on camera, and it's clear she has staff in the room off camera, and they're trying to talk to her. The theory is, and I think it plays out in this clip, to give her questions to ask on this clip. But she puts her hands over her mouth and says, it's a live broadcast, so that they stop feeding her the question. So you have to watch the clip. It's really even better this way, but it's Veep at its purest.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Flood, we really got to watch those areas and those communities. So it takes quite a while for that water to drain.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Ken, I have a question for you. You mentioned words matter, and I know there's a lot of media following this briefing.
Do you see what I'm talking about? Her voice is like this now.
Yeah, maybe she is taking it down a little bit.
Yes.
But she calls in to CNN. She's never called into CNN during a storm before. As DeSantis notes, he's working well with the federal government.
Yes.
Then
and that she has not called once, he said.
Never called before. And then she cuts basically an online ad with her calling the mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida.
Mayor Welch, it's Kamala Harris. How are you doing?
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for checking in on us. We're getting ready, we're prepared, and looking forward to rebuilding after this storm passes through.
Let me just first of all thank you for just answering the call to lead in the way that you have. In a time of crisis, your folks are looking in your eyes to see something in you that lets them know everything's going to be okay. And I know that you had requested that FEMA have a full-service disaster recovery center in St. Petersburg, and that has been confirmed that has happened. And they're working with you to determine the right location. How's that coming along?
Well, thank you. That makes a big difference. We did get a chance to chat with Administrator Criswell, and that's really important to St. Pete to have that full-service recovery center. The outreach from the White House and from FEMA has been excellent, and we're really going to need your help to get the city stood back up. But really appreciate your partnership, Madam Vice President.
Okay, well, know that you got it, and know that you are invited to give any feedback about what you might need in real time, because you're the leadership on the ground, so you know what your folks need.
We'll absolutely do that, and we appreciate your partnership.
Please take care of yourself, Mayor, and I'll just stay in touch with your team.
I just...
Yeah.
I
don't know. I mean, it just I hate to say
Look,
it just comes off as.
I'm sure it's nice to know that important people are thinking
Yes.
about you, right? So it's nice to get that call for that reason. But the idea that she's like directing FEMA to send what FEMA needs to send is just absolute nonsense.
And again, her message that she intends to send, that she is a responsible executive
at the controls
being undercut by Joe Biden, who himself says that he's worked well with Ron DeSantis. I mean, that's
just amazing stuff. One more point on her her delving into her passion about hurricane preparedness. She also tweeted to any company who would use Hurricane Milton to exploit people who are desperate for help through illegal fraud or price gouging, whether at the gas pump, airport, hotel counter, or anywhere else, you will be held accountable. You won't be surprised to know that the state of Florida already has laws about this.
I'm sure.
Actually, the slogan for the state of Florida under DeSantis should be, "We've thought of that."
Yeah.
We've thought of that. One great tweet from earlier today was the media, as I assumed at first, the Tropicana field had been used to put linemen to stay overnight as a shelter, but the storm came through and blew off the roof of the Tropicana. I mean, it's like dramatic. Wow. And the media said, because they had been informed that the linemen were there, oh my gosh, this is where the linemen were staying. State of Florida, his comms people, himself, all like, nope, we moved them because we saw where the storm was coming and we knew it might be a problem.
He's very good at monitoring directions of the storm. He really is. This has happened before, if you remember this.
And again, like, this hard work saves lives.
Yeah.
Nonsense and making these phone calls that she's doing for performance sake do not. And so, like, let's just reward the good behavior. That's all I'm saying.
So 2028, he's still in play, right?
He could, yeah. We can't have nice things, you know that.
Okay. Mary Catherine and I have just a call out here.
Okay.
Our listener and friend who I just mentioned in the last two episodes, Tal Fortgang, big fan of the show, says, first of all, he said, regarding our Ask a Jew.
Yes.
And Tal is Jewish. He says, I can consider him my own personal, my own hotline. Yes, it means 5,785 years since the 6 days of creation described in Genesis. We were talking about the Jewish New Year. Though he says there are many arguments in the Talmud and Midrash about what exactly that means. Does day, yom in Hebrew, mean 24 hours or long period of time? There's also debate among Jewish sages as to whether we are counting from the first Friday, the creation of man, or the first Shabbat, completion of creation, or even some other day. And that would mean potentially thousands of years, depending on what yom means.
Whoa.
So how do you like that? He suggests an episode called Getting Hebrew Hammered. Is that? And lastly, since this episode is, when you're listening to this, the following Monday, Mary Catherine, is Thanksgiving in Canada. So happy Thanksgiving to our Canadian listeners. You know who you are. I don't know. Do you think they do turkey?
I mean, they probably want to be different, so I don't think so.
They have poutine. And also, are they celebrating their meeting with the Indians the way we do? You know?
You know, we need to do some more research.
Well, yeah, Getting Hammered investigates, because I know, it's such a great idea, just the holiday in itself. Some people want to make it problematic, but we think it's a wonderful holiday. It's my favorite holiday. Even in Germany, they have a day, they call it Erdendanktag, which is the Earth Day thanks, right? It's thanks to the Earth. But I don't think it has to do with any meeting of Germans and Indians.
With the Native Americans?
No, I don't think so. Okay, well, we'll look into
Excuse me, the indigenous people.
Yes.
Would not be Native Americans there.
Thank you. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Victorino Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on Instagram and YouTube and see our lovely faces. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.